first off, everybody, my name is Paul Sydlansky. I'm the founder of Lake Road Advisors. We're a financial planning firm that specializes in working with parents with young families all across the country. We're excited to have you here today at our third webinar of the year, Estate Planning for Busy Parents. The goal for this presentation today is to really provide you with some insights and information that will allow you to possibly take some action on your own plan, whether that's making amendments, whether that is actually putting a plan in place. We want to be able to help you understand where are those areas where you may need some changes. This is one of the most important topics that we talk to our clients about, and it's really our focus here in the fall. I'm really happy to have Mike Veruto with us today. He is from the law firm of Klausner Cook based in Ithaca, New York, and he specializes in estate planning. Our format for today's meeting is really going to be a Q&A, and I'm going to be hitting Michael up with some questions and topics that we hear all the time for our clients. And again, with the goal in place of informing you and letting you know as busy parents what you should be thinking of. If you have any questions as we go through this, please put it in the question or chat box. We'll try to answer questions as we go. If not, we'll have time at the end to answer these questions. If there are no questions now, I'm looking, it doesn't look like any. Michael, you ready to get it kicked off?
I am, Paul, thanks.
All right, perfect. So as financial planners, we're talking about estate planning all the time, and I know you as an estate planning lawyer are doing the same. But for people on the call, before we jump into some of the specifics, can you tell us what is estate planning and why it's important for your family to have an estate plan?
Absolutely. Estate planning, generally speaking, is the process of taking a look at your personal and financial snapshot, just getting an idea of who you are and what type of assets you have and what your interests are, and then deciding how to best manage those assets during your lifetime, just to ensure that the assets are taken care of, managed in an appropriate way, so that whatever your eventual scheme is, wherever you eventually want those assets to go, that we put them in the best position to actually make it to that point where you reach a period of possibly incompetence, due to health issues, whether they be physical or mental, or you get to a point where you pass away, and you want to make sure that those assets are taken care of and that they're incorporated into a plan that we can actually effectively take out. It includes things like drafting a will, making sure that that will is drafted in such a way that when you have bequests that you want assets to go to a particular person, that we can do it in a clear way that's understandable to somebody that might be reading that document after you've passed. It also includes making determinations for things like minor children. Who's going to take care of them? Who's going to be in charge of making decisions on their behalf and making, decisions about them as a person, where they're going to go to school, that type of stuff, as opposed to whether or not they're going to have access to certain finances. Those are different questions that we would answer. We also take a look at the potential impact of taxation, both now during your lifetime and what the taxation will be potentially at the time that you pass or become incompetent. The other part that we might look at for certain people, especially those people that kind of know that there might be a particular issue or something that they're trying to navigate, whether that's a health issue that they're suffering from right now that might be long-term or debilitating, that we can plan for that long-term as well. So if there comes a point where they need long-term care, for example, or they need some sort of medical intervention, that we have the ability to protect assets from creditors' claims and make sure that they're paid for in the most economic way possible. It also includes, believe it or not, nowadays taking care of your pets. That's one I've seen a lot of. So who gets to take care of the family cat or dog?
No, understood. So kind of the next question that leads into this is that, are estate plans for everybody? Should everybody have an estate plan? Because sometimes people think, oh, well, I don't need to think about this. I'm newly married. We don't have kids, or I'm single. I don't need to. Does everybody need to have an estate plan?
If you have assets and you have a specific idea about what you want to happen to those assets, you definitely need an estate plan. New York State has sort of an estate plan that's statutory, that governs where assets will go if you don't have a will. But in my experience, it doesn't work for many people. It takes into account certain percentages, and it gives money to kids outright when they're 18 years old, when they may not have any idea. I can tell you, when I was 18, I had no idea what to do with any assets that anybody gave me. They'd be gone very quickly. So if you're
Right.
looking to manage that, into the next generation and make sure that people are well taken care of, you should have an estate plan.
Got it. Got it. So that really leads me to my next question. What are the pitfalls that if you're a parent, if you do not have an estate plan in place, what happens?
Yeah. I touched on the first one, is that, assets probably are not going to go where you want them to. Again, you can read EPTL 4-1.1. It's a very old statute, and you can tell by reading it that it hasn't been updated in a very long time. The other thing that happens is, that lump sum that gets transferred to kids outright. There are no trusts or anything anticipated by that. If you want something to be managed in a particular way for a particular purpose, that's not the case if you don't have an estate plan. It just all goes to that individual statutorily by court supervision. If you have minor kids and you don't set up the possibility of a guardianship so that you can appoint a guardian to look out for your kids, the court will appoint one, and it's probably not going to be the person that you want. So there's a lot of pitfalls that go into it. It really depends on your specific situation, what it might mean for you. One of the big things that happens nowadays is second marriages. So, you'll be married to somebody, and that spouse will have the ability, if you don't do anything about it, they'll receive the vast majority of your assets, and they can send them all to their side of the family and ignore your kids entirely, if that ends up, being a pitfall in your particular scenario. So a lot of things that are controlled by government, and they can change at a moment's notice. If they enact a new law, you don't have a say in it, but they're going to tell you where your assets go if you don't have a plan.
Right, right. Two follow-up questions. The first one, probate. I hear that a lot, and I know it's something that I think most people know they want to avoid, but just really quickly, what is it, and why is it usually not something that you want to be involved in?
So probate, in its most general sense, refers to the surrogates court of the state of New York, a judge in the surrogates court overseeing the management of your assets upon death. There's a filing fee to even get in the door. It's based on the dollar amount of your assets. They will look at your will. There's a waiting period. Even once we get somebody appointed as an executor or an administrator, the court forces us by law to wait 7 months before we can actually do anything with those assets. So they kind of sit in limbo for a long time before people can be taken care of. And every question or decision that you need to make, a lot of times has to go before that judge so that they can make a determination. It leaves those assets subject to creditors' claims. Instead of protecting them, which we can do through uses of trusts and other instruments, keeping those things out of your estate. But it's costly, it's time consuming, and overall, it puts a lot of discretion in the hands of a judge instead of in your own decision making.
Okay. Now, the second question, which I think leads into maybe a solution to help folks with probate, and I know, of course, everybody's situation is different, but as a parent, you often hear about, okay, my children are minors and they can't get assets. They know that. And what happens to the funds, and trusts come up. And I know there's a lot of different uses for trusts. But as a parent with young children, first, could you just explain what a trust is in its simplest form? And then how could a trust be used to help a parent who has young children to protect them, to make sure those assets are used properly?
Sure. So there's a variety of different types of trust, but the general theory of a trust is that it's an entity that survives you. It is a separate document. The document is called the trust agreement or the trust document, and that sets forth the terms by which the assets that you put into the trust will be managed. And it allows for many, many years of succession planning all in one document so that you could put assets in that trust. Those assets could be used for your own benefit during your lifetime. And then upon your death, instead of having to go to probate, those assets can be managed by a trustee in conformance with whatever terms you place in that trust document, so that you can put restrictions on the money. Instead of them getting a lump sum at 18, you can tell my trustee, hey, I want this money used for their health, education, maintenance, and support pursuant to very specific guidelines up until, say, the age of 25 or the age of 30. I use 30 a lot. Our minds tend to be a little bit more mature and able to make decisions at 30. So you say 30, and then at age 30, you start distributing assets to them in lump sum so that they can make decisions on their own behalf. But the best part about it is it offers all sorts of protections that don't end up in the hands of a court.
Got it. Got it. Okay, one last question on trusts, and maybe this does fall into trust, but we work with a lot of clients who own businesses, and talk about, when you think about an estate plan, the importance of making sure that your business is taken care of, and how that could be done, maybe with a trust or maybe outside of a trust. But talk about business succession planning.
Yeah, I'm smirking a little bit because it's the quintessential lawyer answer, and that's it. It depends. It
Okay.
depends on a lot of factors. It depends on how your business is structured. It depends on what you want to do with the business. It depends on whether or not you have family members or intended recipients of the business that are already engaged in the business, as opposed to, my kids haven't had anything to do with the business, but eventually I want to leave them at least the value of the business. So having a plan in place for succession planning really calls into question three things. The first is kind of, where do you want the ownership interest to go? Do I want my kids to own this business eventually? Or do I want them to simply have the value? Are we preparing this for a sale upon my death, or are we preparing this business to actually be turned over to somebody? If we're going to turn it over to somebody, how are we going to do that? Are we going to do it piecemeal during my lifetime? Is it going to be all at once upon my death? And what mechanism can we use, depending on whether or not it's an LLC, a sole proprietorship, or a corporation? There are different mechanisms that we can use to kind of help that take place, and sometime at a discounted value. So you're not transferring, at the total value of the company. You can kind of give piecemeal discounted ownership interests over time. And then, the big consideration is who's going to run it. I may want my kids to have the business, but they may not be in a position where they can run it. I want it to continue. I want my kids to be into the fold, but maybe at the time my kids come into the fold and I pass away, they're 21 or 22 years old. But I've had this general manager who's been helped me run my business for the last 10 years. Maybe we want to keep him involved, but we want the kids to have an ownership interest. So it's important to consider the holistic approach to your business. Can it run right now if you disappear? Should we be moving in a way that allows for that succession planning from a leadership role as well as an ownership role? So there's a lot that goes into it, but there's a lot of ways that we can kind of structure your business and your business plan to help you save that interest, for when your kids or whoever your intended beneficiaries are come into possession.
Yeah, it's just a whole nother level of complexity, right? I think of your standard estate planning, taking care of your family, making sure things are in place. But then if you're a business owner, it just opens you up to a whole nother set of complex issues that I think folks really need to get ahead of. And you also mentioned something earlier about forget about transferring the ownership, but then the taxable implications of transferring ownership, and what's the most efficient way to do that so you're not creating a huge problem for the next generation. So that's good to know. All right, a couple more questions here. Put you on the spot. What are the three biggest mistakes that you see parents make when it comes to putting together a will or not putting together a will?
Yeah, the biggest.
Let me say that estate plan documents. Let's broaden it.
Yeah, the biggest mistake is not having a plan at all. And I can't tell you the number of times people have come to me and they said, mom or dad are on their deathbed. What can we do? And at that point, I might be able to draft them a will in the time frame if they're still competent. But as far as a detailed estate plan, you missed the window on that one. So that's probably the first one, is that they don't have a plan at all. And part of the planning is not just, keep in mind, it's not just what to do with my assets. It's also how to handle me. Me personally will do a healthcare proxy or a living will that also takes that stress off of the next generation, so that they know what our intentions are and they don't have to make those last minute decisions on their own. The second biggest is probably going through the process lightly, saying, I just need a will. Well, okay, anybody can draft you a will, and a will do what the will says it's going to do. But without a detailed financial plan involved in that process, that will may not be giving you the most benefit that you can get. There's a lot of things besides just having a will. So having an insufficient plan or a partial plan is probably the second biggest mistake, because in some ways it's the functional equivalent of not having a plan. Okay. And then the final thing is probably assuming that what you read on the internet applies to you.
Wait, the internet isn't right all the time?
No. Matter of fact, I saw a meme the other day that says, don't believe everything you read on the internet. And then it's signed by Abraham Lincoln, which I thought was particularly poignant. That was perfect. But keep in mind, the internet is a vast, vast thing, and people who draft things for the internet are drafting them to push you in a particular direction because that's how they make their money. So they may be accurate, but they're also not giving a particular picture for you. They're talking in general schematics, and they're assuming that you understand certain basic points or even fairly complex points about why you might want what it is that they're trying to serve to you. And I've had a number of people through my career come in and say, but I read on the internet, and then they'll give you this litany of things. And, my response typically is, well, yeah, that's not exactly untrue, but it doesn't apply to you at all, So that's probably the third one is thinking that you can read this stuff on the internet and just automatically save yourself all sorts of time and trouble by getting something from somebody else that's not going to do a detailed review for you.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense on all those points. And I run into a lot of time when we start working with folks and they're married with kids and they say, oh, we don't have anything. And that's before we even talk about finances, investments, cash flow, say, you know what, let's get you hooked up with a lawyer. Let's get something in place, because that's, to me, is a big red flag. I know probably the answer to this question, but folks who don't have it, don't have a plan or anything in place, from your answer before, going to a LegalZoom type online provider is probably not recommended.
Yeah, well, the biggest critic of LegalZoom is actually LegalZoom. They answer it all in their little blurb that they put at the end of every one of their advertisements. It says, we do not give, it says, we do not give legal advice. We draft documents at your specific direction. They put it on every one of their advertisements. And what it presumes, to anybody with any level of common sense, is you're giving them direction. You know what you need. You know what you're doing. You are essentially an estate planner with years of experience who understands your own financial circumstance really, really well. And you're just going to say, here, LegalZoom, just draft me this document. Essentially what LegalZoom is an AI paralegal who's going to give you exactly what you tell them to give you. And it presumes that you have all these answers already. And if you do, then it's a good tool for you. But if you don't, if you're like most of us and you have questions, even estate planners look at another estate planner and say, hey, give me a second pair of eyes to make sure I'm not missing something. So that's probably the biggest reason not to use them.
So for folks who don't have a plan, how do they get started? How do you start when you have nothing in place?
Well, there's a couple different avenues, and it kind of depends on your specific scenario again. But if you've got a financial planner, you may not have an estate planner or an estate planning attorney, but if you've got a financial planner, that's a good place to start, because they do have a lot of really good knowledge base, especially with regard to the assets that they deal with on a regular basis. And they can say, hey, I've dealt with other clients. This is kind of the direction that you need to be going in, and it gives them a way to kind of open the conversation and open the window. But eventually, you should see an estate planning attorney, somebody that's been doing it for a while, somebody that has a breadth of knowledge that can take a look at and I can't stress this more importantly than anything else I've said, it has to be based on your particular circumstances, your desires, your assets, your plan, your heirs, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, because there's a lot of tools out there, and any one of them might benefit you. The question is not what might benefit you, it's what might benefit you the most. What plan can we put in place that's really going to get you to your end goal as quickly and painlessly as possible? Okay. And that can only be done after a detailed analysis by a qualified attorney.
So even more simply, when people look for financial planners, hopefully the word is out there that you want a certified financial planner, and you look at cfp.net, and that you want a fee-only fiduciary, and there's NAPFA for that. Is there any similar type, if I'm looking for a lawyer in New York or Pennsylvania or California and I want to find somebody, is there a network or maybe a way to search for that person?
There are a lot of different networks out there, but I will also caution you that a lot of those networks are kind of pay to play. So you'll see things out there like super lawyers or things like that. And certainly people have to be nominated, but you can tell your friends to nominate you. So does that make you a super lawyer? Does it make you a good PR person? So the real question is to do your research and talk to people that are similarly situated. Talk to your friends, talk to people in your community that you trust. Find the people locally who have a good experience with people that and make sure that they've done this a lot. And I think you can probably sit down with a lawyer, and in the first 10 or 15 minutes, if they say, I'll have to check on that, I'll have to check on that, I'll have to check on that, That's not somebody who's been doing it every day. So the real key is probably to work with folks like you and work with other people in the community and say, who do you recommend? And word of mouth, I have found through my lifetime, not only in my own profession, but in every profession that I work with, word of mouth tends to be the most accurate.
Got it. All right, good. So we have a few more minutes here. I want to hit you with a couple more questions. And I know this is, I'm not going to hold you to this, but cost, right? Generally speaking, if I'm a parent and I need to put together a will, a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, what should I be expecting? Is this $500? Is this $5,000? Just standard estate planning package.
So a standard estate planning package for us would include a will that would have probably trust provisions for minor children, something that would keep them in line with your wishes until they're 30. It might have a disclaimer trust that deals with the potential for a taxable estate, federally or state taxable estate. So you deal with documents like a will, healthcare proxy, power of attorney, living will to kind of get that basic breadth of understanding and a good basic plan. You're looking somewhere around $1,200 to $1,500 on average. If we're going to do a detailed living trust or an irrevocable trust or a revocable trust or a supplemental needs trust, obviously that's in addition to that. But that's really based on specific circumstances.
Got it. All right, great. So we do have two questions here. I want to hit these before. I had one more question I wanted to ask you, but I want to make sure that we get to these. The first one, what should families do now to protect their assets for potential assisted living nursing home care needs in the future? And I'm just kind of smiling because this is one we hear all the time. And I know this is a loaded question, but I'll let you, it depends answer. But I know there's probably a lot of different things that can be done.
Yeah, you read between the lines already. It does depend.
Yeah.
So there are a variety of ways that you can begin sheltering assets because you're concerned about the potential for a loved one needing long-term care, whether that's you or whether that's a parent, whatever it turns out to be, somebody is in the process of potentially needing long-term care. There are very detailed rules, both federal and state rules, about how you can plan for these things. There's what's called a 5-year look-back period, so that any transactions that take place within 5 years of trying to qualify for Medicaid can be looked at and can be potentially set aside as trying to evade this process. So the federal government in particular is not stupid. They know that people are going to try and shelter their assets against this. So the real answer is you need to talk about your specific circumstances with a qualified estate planning attorney and somebody preferably that knows something about Medicaid planning, because it is its own little niche. That's really the only good answer I can give you, is you need to talk to somebody about your specific needs.
Got it. Understood. Okay. And the next question, and I might take a crack at this first, and I'll let you try it after, Michael. If you don't have an estate plan, and it's been a while since you've worked with a financial planner, where do you recommend we start? Financial planner first and then going to an estate lawyer? So for me, kind of harping back on what I said, of course, I think financial planning is important, and it encompasses a lot of different areas of your life, and estate planning is one of the things we do. And as much as I would say come to a financial planner first, for my own selfish reasons, being a fiduciary, I would point you to a lawyer. And I would say this, to me, is the most critical thing that you can do for your family to protect it. Because if you get hit by a bus yesterday and you have nothing in place and you have a young family, there's going to be a lot of problems. And of course, financial stuff you want to handle. But to me, the urgency and not having anything in place would have me point you to a lawyer. Mike, I don't know, you probably agree, don't agree?
I absolutely agree. I agree, because the lawyer is going to be looking at a lot more than just your finances. They're going to be looking at a holistic approach to how you need to manage your life. And right. Whether that is, you need to have a power of attorney in place because you've got some sort of illness, or you might be out of the country, whatever it is. But absent something that's very particular to needing to, deal with a particular account, say, if you're looking holistically at the entire approach, I think the attorney has to come first. Okay, great.
So one last question I had for you, Mike. I hear a lot, and we talked about this before. It just seems like, and I'm in my mid 40s, maybe it's because of my age and parents' age, but a lot of things come up now where people are worried about their own parents. and their plan and their situation. So what can you do as an individual to maybe help your parents? And this could be from really an operational standpoint, it could be from a document standpoint, estate planning standpoint, but what are some of the practical things that maybe you can do, and what are some things that you can't do as a child when you're thinking about your elderly parents?
Well, the first thing you need to figure out is how much your parents want to participate in this process. Because the true answer is if mom and dad are ready to go through this process and they want to share everything with you and they want you to be involved in the process, well, then you can do a lot. You can start the ball rolling. You can have conversations on their behalf. You can gather information for them, make suggestions, introduce them to professionals that you're dealing with, anything that opens the door to helping them make good decisions about their estate planning. What you can't do is tell me what to do for your parents. I see that a lot. People come in and say, I want mom and dad to do this. Can you tell them to do this? No, I cannot tell them to do that. What I can do is have a conversation with mom and dad and say, hey, what do you want to do? And I will caution everybody on the call. I'm very close with my parents, but I can tell you I do not know everything about their circumstances, nor do I really want to know everything about their circumstances unless they decide that they want to tell me. So even if you have the best interests of your parents in mind, you can start that conversation, but it really comes down to talking with them. I have to have detailed conversations with them and have their consent before I can do anything with them.
Yeah, I'm getting to the age where I feel like my parents are a lot like my kids, right? Neither of them listen. And as much as you think you know what's best for them, and unless they want to share. But what we've been telling clients is to say, hey, mom and dad, we just went through our plan, in case something happens to us. Have you thought of it? These are some of the things that came up, maybe leading them down that path, just because I think there's so many complexities, and especially when you talk about, it seems like everywhere you turn, there's people running into issues with dementia or Alzheimer's, and that not having documents in place when somebody has that mental decline can really add some complexity to trying to put a plan in place.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you just said, especially from the perspective of, a parent to children. It's the same way with the other people that we interact with in our lives too. And in some cases, that's your parents. You lead by example. You say, because you're also, after you've gone through it yourself, you're in a better position to kind of give them an idea of what to expect and to speak to them coherently and intelligently about the process that you went through and how it helped you. So I think that's a great idea, is to lead by example and make sure that your own house is in order, and then start asking the questions of your parents and see if they're interested in doing it.
Great. So we got about a minute left. Michael, anything else that busy parents with kids should think about in terms of being prepared, putting something in place? Anything else you want to add?
The only thing I will say is, no matter who you're dealing with, ask questions. Always ask questions. If you have something that's in the back of your brain that you say, I'm not going to ask that, they'll think it's stupid. No, we don't think it's stupid. I haven't had a stupid question asked yet. What I have is questions asked by people who don't do this every day, so they don't understand the implications. And a lot of times people will ask a question that they thought was stupid that tends to be a very important question that needed to be asked, because it takes us down a completely different road that saves them a lot of time, sometimes a lot of money, but a lot of heartache in the end. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Always ask as many as pop into your head. We like hearing them.
That's great. And totally agree. Totally agree. You and I are knee deep in our professions every day. And sometimes we forget, even with things like jargon and terms. And when I say estate planning so much, I want to make sure that people know what I actually mean by that. But
absolutely. If I say something that you don't understand, make me explain it.
Yeah. No, this is great. Michael, thank you so much for your time today. This was super helpful. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Hopefully you learned something today, and you can take some of this information away and make a change, or maybe just implement a plan for your family, because this is one of the most important things you can do for them. So thank you, everybody, and have a good day.